straight away, it really puts me off because I'm thinking, why would I want to hire you? Okay, let's go. So today I want to talk about interviewing. Now, I know in the previous videos we basically talked a lot about making money on the side and doing entrepreneurial things that lots of people want to do. But one thing I want to do is kind of take it a little bit back to basics, because not every single one of you who watches these videos, one either wants to do a full-time kind of side hustle, so they obviously need a job, and being an entrepreneur and kind of working for yourself and doing these little side hustles isn't for everybody. So I want to talk to you today about what you can do in order to have a successful interview, and I'm going to talk about that in two perspectives just because it's really close to my heart, and I can talk about it from me going to interview and trying to get a job, as well as me interviewing people and what I'm looking for. So the first thing I want to talk about then is preparing for an interview. Now, from a perspective of a business, you should be going in there and knowing exactly what that business does. Now, I've had this in so many occasions where people have come to us and the first question I ask is, why do you want to work at Social Instinct, which is our agency? And they don't know how to answer the question, and straight away it really puts me off because I'm thinking, yeah, you might have spent some time coming over here and you've come to the office and you've made this effort. But if you haven't made the effort and done the research about what we actually do, why would I want to hire you? And that puts people straight away in the back foot. Now, from me going to interview, and this is something that I've actually done recently because I actually work full time as well as running the agency. So with my point of view, so I basically went for a couple of job interviews over the last couple of weeks. And every single job that I've been to, I've researched. I've basically made sure I know exactly what the business does. I then kind of deep dive a little bit more further into who potentially would be my team if I was to go for this job. Now, there's ways you can do this. There's loads of things. You can obviously go to the actual website for the company, and if you want to look into kind of a little bit more of a deep dive, LinkedIn is probably your go-to tool. Now, there is a little bit of a kind of toing and froing with LinkedIn because people can see that you've looked, but that's not a bad thing. It just means that you're showing and that you're actually doing research on the potential interviewer. So who's the manager, look at their experience, is there anything that you can relate to, as well as the other team members who might fall underneath that kind of area. So with what I did with this role is that I looked at the person who was going to be interviewing me, who was the hiring manager. I looked at their boss, and then I looked at a variation of other people within the team who kind of fell within the area I know that I'd be going into. It wasn't so much that I kind of did it so I could stalk them and kind of know like the ins and outs of them. It's just to give me a general gist about what these people's experience has been, how I could potentially then relate to that person. And then when I go into that interview, it actually gives me a little bit more confidence because I already feel like I might know them, not to obviously a personal level, but to a certain extent that I know who I'm going to be looking out for. It kind of breaks down some barriers. It makes me feel a bit more comfortable because I know what that person might be experienced in, what their experience has been throughout their career, and it gives me kind of a little bit of context as well because I can then go in and talk about my expertise and make it more relatable to them. So that's the first thing I'd say, is do a lot of research. Other things are kind of obviously a bit more obvious. So obviously making sure that you're on time, that's a given. Now, life happens, trains, buses, traffic, so there might be cases where you are late, but if that ever happens, keep in communication with the company that you're going to go meet. So give them a phone call, email them to say that you're going to be late. Don't just turn up 20 minutes late and just expect to be seen in the same light when you haven't given them any like pre-warning. Because yeah, we as an employer, I'd understand and go, okay, that's fine, like traffic happens or there's been a train strike or whatever it might be. But if you just turned up and rocked up 20 minutes late, I'm not going to have a best impression of you. And if all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm late because of the mistake, I'm late, then obviously it shows that you don't really want this job. You're just here for the sake of it. On the other side, obvious thing again, try to leave early. Always expect the worst about when you're trying to travel for an interview. Other things kind of obvious is what I'd say is making sure that you're dressed appropriately. Now, not every single business requires you to go in there in a suit, a tie and shirt, and obviously go in there as a very formal way of dressing. Now, companies these days, depending on where you are going, you can be a bit more relaxed. Now, I'm not saying go super relaxed where you're there in like a tracksuit. Obviously, wear something that you're kind of comfortable in and you're able to have that conversation, but is also aligned to the business itself. So if you've done some research, as we talked about before, and you've seen on people's social posts and LinkedIn and so forth that people do kind of dress a bit more casual, then obviously you can match that vibe. Now, if all of a sudden you see that they're all wearing suits because you're going for, I don't know, a law firm, for example, where people naturally, or a financial firm where people naturally dress a bit more smarter, then obviously dress appropriate. So do your research before you even get there. Now, it becomes the day you're at the interview, people are going to start asking you a lot of questions. So generally, they're going to start talking about you as a person, talk about your past experience. So just give them an honest overview of what you have done before in the past. That's either from job expertise, or if you haven't had a job in the past, your education. Now, there's always relevance of what you can bring to a conversation based on your experience. Now, we can talk about people who are going into jobs, so somebody who's like first ever job, and how can you, some people might comment and go, how can I talk about my experience when I've never had it? Now, life is an experience, so all you need to do is basically think about the scenario that they're giving you and kind of go, okay, it might not be able to be answered in a work-based scenario, but let me talk about it in my university or my college or my school scenario, and this is basically how I achieved it. So there's a technique I want to talk to you all about around how to actually answer the questions for an interview, and this is a really good method, and it's something that I personally use when I used to go for interviews. I know you've been using it recently as well, and it gives a lot more clarity to how you're actually answering the question. Now, it's a structure called the STAR method, and basically what that stands for is situation, task, action, and then the result. So let me just break that down a little bit more further to you. So if I was to ask you and I was to say, give me an example of when you've dealt with a difficult situation, what you would do is tell me the situation. So that's the first step. So the first step is to tell me what actually happened. Now, this basically paints a picture to the person, and they go, oh, okay, so I'm putting myself in this situation right now because of the explanation that you're giving me. So I actually have a bit of context before you answer. Now, if you were basically like, oh, there was a time when somebody wasn't happy and they hung the phone, and that's all I did, and I moved on, isn't a great answer. Now, if you put yourself in a situation and say, okay, so there was a time when there was this customer and this is what they said, they weren't happy with the situation, so this is what I do. And the next part of that is the task itself. So the task basically talks about the actual problem or the challenge that you took responsibility for, not what anybody else in the team might have done, not anybody else that your manager might have done, because this is all about you. And this is something as well when people interview, is talking about a we opposed to a you or an I, because a lot of people will talk about it as a broader situation, but from an employer's perspective, they want to know what you personally have done in order to achieve success. So this is where you really need to talk about that responsibility or that task that you were designated to do. Now, the next part then is the action. So this basically means, what did you actually do? So you might have had the task and you've been assigned that task, or you've designated that task. Now, what did you actually do in order to actually, in this case of this difficult person or difficult situation, what did you do in order to achieve a result? So in this case, you really need to kind of sell yourself and say, this is what I did in order to get to the next step and see a result. And then the last part is just basically that. So the result, what happened, what was the outcome? So the outcome could have been, I overturned that customer, that person was really dissatisfied at the start, and in the situation, this is what happened, and this is what I did, and now that customer became really happy, and I turned that person around, and if it's a sales job, I won the sale, or something along them lines. So really think about how you structure your answers, and that gives people really good context around what you personally have done in order to achieve a sticky situation, and this applies to every single question that the interviewer basically says. So you can put yourself into a scenario that you've had previously, and one thing I would say is before you answer any questions is have a real good think about it. Don't just jump straight into it unless you've prepared your answers, because sometimes what you can do as well is look for generic questions that people are going to answer you. This might not work on technical skills, but on kind of like the competency based questions, which basically means like broad general behavioral questions, you can kind of do some decent level of research of generic questions, and it might fall within there. It might not be asked in the same way, it might be asked in a different way, but it'll give you a general gist of what that kind of types of competency based questions there are out there. So really have a look at the STAR technique. Wouldn't recommend it enough. It's definitely got me through some really good interviews, and like I said before, the interviews that I've been going for lately for some really senior positions, I was successful, so it has to work. The other part that I was going to talk about then in interviewing is just basically selling yourself as a person. One thing that a lot of people do, not just necessarily from a skills-based perspective or a technical perspective or whatever your skill sets might be or whatever it is that you're applying for, people will be judging you as a person and if you would actually fit within the actual culture of the team. So this isn't a kind of something that you can actually help in the sense of if you are a good fit, because it comes from levels of confidence, it comes with how you are as a person, what your potential interests might be, but all you can do is be yourself. And what I would say to anybody who asks me is make sure that that is all you are doing, is being yourself at these interviews. Be your true self. I know people say sell yourself, and obviously that's true, and obviously perceive a level of confidence when going into an interview, but you have to realistically realize that one, is this a right fit for me personally? Because there's this company that I'm trying to apply to, do they fit within my values? Is the culture what I want to be involved in? Or you have to look at it from the other side, as an interviewer, does the person in front of me fit within the team? Are they gonna gel? Are they gonna have a good time? Are they gonna work well together? Does that person have that certain level of drive that I'm looking for? And that's basically what I would recommend when it comes to obviously looking at how you can fit in within the team and how you can sell yourself as well. So there's loads of different techniques when it comes to interviewing, and there's loads of research that you can obviously do online, but these are just my perspectives from me going into interview and also me interviewing people. Now, I personally look at culture when it comes to the agency. I have to look at what's going to fit. Is that person going to fit within the team, the dynamics? Are they going to work together well with my team? Are they going to go off on shoots, on filming, and they're going to be able to speak to clients in certain ways, and going to have that level of professionalism, but not too kind of corporate, and has that kind of fit. So that's how I look at it from my own business perspective. So yeah, I mean, that basically wraps up then. So for a good interview, like I said before, to summarize, be yourself, look at the STAR technique, and make sure that you're on time, as well as dress appropriate, and be really as confident as you can be. So if you've got any questions or want to know more about interviewing, drop some comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers, bye.